Sarah Martinez checked her watch for the 10th time as she stood outside the mountain cabin. The real estate development meeting was supposed to start an hour ago, but she was the only one here. Her phone showed no signal, which explained why nobody had called to cancel or reschedule. The October wind cut through her business suit, making her shiver. She had driven 3 hours from the city to this remote location in the Colorado Rockies for what her boss called the most important client meeting of the year. The Henderson Group wanted to buy this entire mountain area for a luxury resort development, and Sarah was the lead architect on the project. She tried the cabin door and found it unlocked. Inside, the rustic space was warm and inviting, with a stone fireplace, wooden beams, and large windows overlooking the forest. Someone had clearly prepared for the meeting. There were fresh flowers on the dining table, bottled water, and a coffee set up in the kitchen. Sarah set up her laptop and presentation materials, hoping the others would arrive soon. She was reviewing her plans when she heard a car door slam outside. Finally, she thought, walking to the window. A tall man with dark hair was unloading bags from a black SUV. He wore jeans and a flannel shirt, not the business attire she expected from the Henderson Group representatives. As he approached the cabin, she could see he was handsome in a rugged way, with strong features and confident movements. He knocked on the door, and Sarah opened it with a professional smile. "Hello, I'm Sarah Martinez from Pinnacle Architecture. Are you with the Henderson Group?" The man looked surprised. "Henderson Group? No, I'm Jake Mitchell. I own this cabin." His voice was deep and warm, with just a hint of confusion. "I wasn't expecting anyone to be here." Sarah felt her stomach drop. "You own this cabin? But we're supposed to have a meeting here about the resort development project." Jake's expression darkened. "Resort development? What resort development?" "The Henderson Group wants to buy this entire mountain area to build a luxury resort. I'm the architect working on the preliminary designs. We were told the property owner agreed to meet today to discuss the project." "Well, I'm the property owner, and I never agreed to any meeting about selling my land." Jake's voice was firm but not angry. Someone made a big mistake. Sarah pulled out her phone to call her office, but there was still no signal. "I can't get through to anyone. My boss arranged this meeting. He said everything was confirmed." Jake studied her for a moment. "Come on, let's figure this out inside. It's getting cold." They sat at the kitchen table while Sarah explained the project in detail. The Henderson Group wanted to buy not just Jake's 40 acres, but also the surrounding forest land owned by the state. They planned to build a 5-star resort with golf courses, ski slopes, and luxury accommodations. "They can't build anything without your property," Sarah said, showing him the site plans on her laptop. "Your land is right in the middle of what they want to develop." Jake listened carefully, his jaw tightening as she spoke. "This mountain has been in my family for 4 generations. My great-grandfather bought this land in 1924. I built this cabin with my own hands 5 years ago. I'm not selling to anyone, especially not for some fancy resort that will destroy everything I love about this place." Sarah could see the passion in his eyes as he talked about his family's history with the land. Part of her admired his dedication to preserving something meaningful, but she also knew how much this project meant to her career. "I understand why you'd want to keep it," she said carefully. "But the offer they're prepared to make would be substantial. Life-changing money." "I don't need life-changing money," Jake replied. "I need this place to stay exactly as it is." They sat in uncomfortable silence for a moment. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message that somehow got through. "Storm warning. Major blizzard approaching Colorado Rockies. Travel not advised after 6 p.m. She showed Jake the message. "I should probably head back to the city soon." Jake looked out the window at the darkening sky. "I hate to tell you this, but that storm is moving in faster than they predicted. Look at those clouds." Heavy gray clouds were rolling over the mountains, and the wind was picking up significantly. As they watched, the first snowflakes began to fall. "My truck can handle mountain roads pretty well," Sarah said, though she didn't sound entirely convinced. "In normal weather, maybe, but not in a blizzard. These mountain roads become death traps when the snow gets heavy. You could slide off a cliff or get stuck for days." Jake's concerns seemed genuine. "You should stay here tonight, and leave in the morning when it's safe." Sarah felt trapped between her desire to get away from this awkward situation and the reality of the dangerous weather. "I can't stay here. This is your home, and we barely know each other. Plus, we're on opposite sides of a business deal. Look, I get that this is weird, Jake said, but I'm not going to let you risk your life driving in a blizzard just because we disagree about a resort development. This cabin has 2 bedrooms and plenty of food. We're both adults. We can handle one night. The snow was falling harder now, and visibility was dropping quickly. Sarah realized she didn't really have a choice. Okay, but just for tonight. And I want to be clear that I still believe this development could be good for the area. It would bring jobs and economic growth to the region. And I believe it would destroy the natural beauty and wildlife habitat that makes this place special, Jake countered. But we don't have to solve that tonight. Jake showed her to the guest bedroom, which was simply but comfortably furnished with a queen bed, dresser, and reading chair. There are extra blankets in the closet, and the bathroom is right across the hall. I'll get a fire going in the living room. Sarah unpacked her overnight bag, grateful that she always kept emergency supplies in her car for business trips. She changed into jeans and a sweater, feeling more relaxed in casual clothes. When she came back to the living room, Jake had a warm fire crackling in the stone fireplace. The scene was cozy and inviting, very different from her sterile city apartment. I'm making dinner, Jake called from the kitchen. Hope you like pasta. It's about all I can manage without much notice. I can help, Sarah offered, joining him in the kitchen. I'm actually a pretty good cook when I have the time. They worked together preparing a simple meal of pasta with marinara sauce and garlic bread. Despite their professional disagreement, Sarah found Jake easy to talk to. He was intelligent and well-read, not the simple mountain man she had initially assumed. So what's your story? She asked as they cooked. What do you do when you're not protecting family land from developers? Jake smiled. I'm a freelance environmental consultant. I help companies assess the ecological impact of their projects. Ironic, right? I work with developers sometimes, but only the ones who care about minimizing environmental damage. That is ironic. So you understand the development side of things. I do, and I understand that not all development is bad, but this particular project would be an environmental disaster. This mountain ecosystem is incredibly fragile. The wildlife corridors, the watershed, the old-growth forest areas. A resort of this scale would destroy all of that. Sarah had to admit he made valid points. The Henderson Group did say they would follow all environmental regulations. Regulations are just the bare minimum, Jake said, stirring the sauce. They don't protect against the cumulative impact of that much development in such a sensitive area. They ate dinner by the fireplace as the storm raged outside. The wind howled through the trees, and snow piled up against the windows. Sarah was grateful to be warm and safe inside the cabin. Tell me about your work, Jake said. You obviously care about architecture. What got you started in that field? Sarah's face lit up as she talked about her passion for designing buildings that harmonized with their natural surroundings. I went into architecture because I wanted to create beautiful spaces that enhance people's lives without destroying the environment around them. I specialize in sustainable design and green building techniques. Then, why are you working on a project like this resort? Jake asked, genuinely curious rather than accusatory. Sarah sighed. Because I need this project to succeed. If I can prove myself with a high-profile development like this, I'll finally be able to start my own firm and focus on the kind of projects I really care about. Right now, I'm just another employee at a big architecture firm, working on whatever projects they assign me. So this resort is a stepping stone to something better? Exactly. I know it's not ideal, but sometimes you have to compromise in the short term to achieve your long-term goals. Jake nodded thoughtfully. I can understand that. We all make compromises. But what if there was another way to achieve your goals without compromising your values? What do you mean? What if instead of a massive resort, we developed something smaller and more sustainable? Something that brings economic benefits to the area without destroying the ecosystem? Sarah looked at him skeptically. The Henderson Group wants a 5-star resort with 200 rooms, 3 restaurants, and a championship golf course. They're not interested in a small, sustainable project. Maybe not. But there might be other investors who would be interested in a different approach. They talked late into the evening, sharing stories about their backgrounds and their dreams for the future. Sarah learned that Jake had grown up in Denver, but moved to the mountains after his divorce 3 years ago. He had wanted a simpler life, closer to nature and away from the stress of city living. What about you? Jake asked. Ever been married? Engaged once, but it didn't work out. My ex-fiancé said I cared more about my career than our relationship. He wasn't entirely wrong. Sarah stared into the fire. I've always been ambitious, maybe too ambitious for my own good. Ambition isn't a bad thing, Jake said. But it's important to know what you're willing to sacrifice for success and what you're not. The conversation was getting too personal and serious. Sarah changed the subject to lighter topics, and they spent another hour talking about books, movies, and travel. She found herself enjoying Jake's company more than she had expected. When she finally went to bed around midnight, Sarah lay awake listening to the storm and thinking about their conversation. Jake had challenged her assumptions about the resort project in ways that made her uncomfortable. She had been so focused on the career benefits that she hadn't really considered the environmental impact. But she also couldn't ignore the reality of her situation. This project could make her career, and she had worked too hard to throw away such an important opportunity. The next morning, Sarah woke to brilliant sunlight streaming through her bedroom window. The storm had passed, leaving behind a pristine blanket of white snow covering the forest. The view was absolutely breathtaking. She found Jake in the kitchen making coffee and pancakes. "Good morning," he said with a warm smile. "Hope you slept well." "Better than I expected, actually. This place is so peaceful." Sarah accepted a cup of coffee gratefully. "The view this morning is incredible. That's what I love most about living here. Every morning is like a gift." Jake flipped a pancake expertly. "I checked the road conditions online. The main highway is clear, but they recommend waiting until noon for the mountain roads to be completely safe." Part of Sarah was relieved to have a few more hours before she had to leave and return to the complicated reality of the resort project. Another part of her was nervous about spending more time with Jake, whose presence was affecting her in ways she hadn't anticipated. After breakfast, Jake suggested a short walk to show her more of his property. The snow crunched under their boots as they walked along a trail that led to a spectacular overlook. "This is where they want to put the main resort building," Jake said, pointing to a large meadow below them. "And the golf course would go there, where those old-growth pine trees are." Sarah could see what would be lost if the development went forward. The pristine wilderness stretched for miles, with snow-capped peaks rising in the distance. Wildlife tracks crisscrossed the snow, deer, rabbits, and what looked like elk prints. "It really is beautiful," she admitted. "I can see why you want to protect it." They stood close together in the cold air, their breath creating small clouds of vapor. Sarah found herself very aware of Jake's presence beside her, his height, his strength, the way he moved with confidence through his natural environment. "Sarah," Jake said quietly, turning to face her, "I know we disagree about this project, but I want you to know that I respect your position. You're clearly talented and passionate about your work." "Thank you," Sarah replied, meeting his eyes. "And I respect your commitment to preserving this place. Your family's history here means something." They were standing very close now, and Sarah felt an unexpected attraction building between them. Jake was looking at her with an intensity that made her heart race. "I should probably get my things together and head back to the city," she said. But she didn't move away. "Probably," Jake agreed, but he didn't step back either. The moment stretched between them, full of possibility and uncertainty. Then Jake reached up and gently brushed a snowflake from her cheek. His touch was soft and warm despite the cold air. "Sarah," he said softly. She knew she should walk away, should maintain professional boundaries, and focus on her career goals. But something about Jake drew her in, his passion for the land, his integrity, his quiet strength. Before she could think too much about it, she stood on her toes and kissed him. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative and questioning. Then Jake's arms came around her, pulling her closer, and the kiss deepened with surprising passion. Sarah felt warmth spread through her entire body despite the cold mountain air. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Sarah looked up into Jake's dark eyes and saw her own surprise and desire reflected there. "That was," she started, then stopped, not sure how to finish the sentence. "Unexpected," Jake finished for her. Yes. Unexpected. Sarah stepped back, suddenly, feeling overwhelmed by what had just happened. I should really go? This complicates everything. Does it have to? Jake asked. Yes, it does. We're on opposite sides of a business deal that's crucial to my career. Getting involved personally would be. She searched for the right word. Unprofessional. Jake nodded, though she could see disappointment in his eyes. I understand. Your career comes first. It's not that simple, Sarah said, frustrated that he didn't understand. This isn't just about my career. It's about my future, my independence, everything I've worked for. I get it, Jake said quietly. I just think there might be MO back in Denver. Sarah threw herself into work with renewed determination. She spent the next 2 weeks refining the resort plans, incorporating every detail the Henderson Group had requested. The project was ambitious and impressive, a world-class destination that would put Colorado on the international luxury travel map. But, late at night, when she was alone in her downtown apartment, Sarah found herself thinking about Jake's mountain cabin. She remembered the warmth of the fireplace, the breathtaking view from the overlook, and, most of all, that unexpected kiss that had left her feeling more alive than she had in months. She tried to push these thoughts aside and focus on her presentation for the Henderson Group. This was her big break, and she couldn't let anything distract her from success. Sarah's boss, Richard Castellanos, called her into his office on a Tuesday morning. Richard was in his 50s, impeccably dressed, and known throughout the firm for his demanding standards and political connections. Sarah, excellent work on the Henderson project, he said, reviewing her latest plans. The preliminary designs are exactly what they're looking for. We should have this deal wrapped up within the month. Actually, Richard, there's a complication, Sarah said carefully. I met with the property owner, Jake Mitchell, and he's not interested in selling his land. Richard frowned. What do you mean he's not interested? Everyone has a price. We just need to find his number. I don't think it's about money. He has strong emotional and environmental objections to the project. Emotional objections? Richard laughed dismissively. Sarah, you're an architect, not a therapist. Our job is to design buildings, not manage people's feelings about change. But, without his property, the project can't move forward. His land is essential to the development. Then, we'll find another way to acquire it. The Henderson Group has lawyers who specialize in these situations. Eminent domain, environmental challenges to his property use, tax complications, there are always options. Sarah felt uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Those tactics seemed pretty aggressive for someone who just wants to keep his family's land. Richard's expression hardened. Sarah, I'm surprised by your attitude. This project represents millions of dollars in revenue for our firm, not to mention the reputation boost of working with the Henderson Group. Your success here could make you the youngest senior partner in the firm's history. The offer was tempting. Senior partner at 32 would give her the financial independence and professional recognition she had always wanted. But something about the conversation left her feeling uneasy. What if we explored alternative locations for the resort? Sarah suggested. There might be other properties that would work just as well. The Henderson Group has already done their site analysis. This location has the perfect combination of accessibility, views, and natural amenities. They're not interested in alternatives. Richard leaned back in his chair. Sarah, I need to know that you're fully committed to this project. Are you going to be a team player, or do I need to assign someone else to handle the Henderson account? The threat was clear. Sarah's entire career at the firm was tied to her success with this project. I'm committed, she said, though the words felt hollow. Good. Now, the Henderson Group wants to meet with Jake Mitchell directly. They're flying in from Chicago next week, and they want you to arrange a face-to-face meeting. Sarah's heart sank. I don't think Jake will agree to meet with them. Make it happen, Richard said firmly. Use whatever leverage you need. Remind him that this development will proceed with or without his cooperation. It would be better for everyone if he's part of the process. That evening, Sarah sat in her apartment staring at Jake's phone number. She had gotten it from the county property records, but she hadn't worked up the courage to call. How do you contact someone you kissed and then ran away from, especially when you're calling to pressure them into something they clearly don't want? Finally, she dialed the number. Jake answered on the second ring. Hello. Jake, it's Sarah Martinez. From the cabin last weekend. There was a pause. Sarah, I didn't expect to hear from you. I'm sorry to bother you, but I need to talk to you about the resort project. Let me guess. The Henderson Group wants to meet. How did you know? Because that's how these things always work. First, they send the architect to scope out the situation. Then, they send the executives to make threats and promises. Sarah felt a stab of guilt at how accurately Jake had read the situation. It's not exactly threats. They just want to discuss options with you directly. Sarah, are you calling me as Jake Mitchell, the property owner, or as Jake who shared dinner and conversation with you last weekend? The question caught her off guard. This is a professional call about the business matter. I see. Jake's voice cooled noticeably. In that case, you can tell the Henderson Group that I'm not interested in meeting with them. My answer is still no. Jake, please just think about it. These are reasonable people who might be willing to work with you on a compromise solution. What kind of compromise? Sarah realized she didn't have a good answer. The Henderson Group hadn't mentioned any willingness to modify their plans. I don't know the specific details yet, but there might be room for negotiation. Sarah, you're a smart woman. Do you really believe they're interested in compromise, or are you just saying what you think I want to hear? His directness was uncomfortable because he was right. I think they're primarily interested in moving forward with their project as planned. Then, there's nothing to discuss. I'm not selling my land for a resort development, period. What if I told you that this project is going to happen whether you participate or not? Sarah asked, hating herself for using Richard's intimidation tactics. Then, I'd say you're not the person I thought you were. The disappointment in his voice stung. Jake, you don't understand the pressure I'm under. My entire career depends on making this project work. And you don't understand that some things are more important than career advancement. They sat in silence for a moment, the gulf between their positions feeling wider than ever. Will you at least consider meeting with them? Sarah asked finally. Just to hear what they have to say? Jake sighed. If I agree to one meeting, will you promise me something? What? Promise me you'll come to the meeting too, and that you'll really listen to both sides instead of just advocating for your client. I can do that, Sarah agreed, though she wasn't sure what good it would accomplish. Fine. One meeting. But it happens here, on my property, so they can see what they're asking me to destroy. Sarah arranged the meeting for the following Saturday. The Henderson Group executives, Michael Henderson III and his development director, Patricia Vance, flew in from Chicago with their lawyers and financial advisors. Richard insisted that Sarah drive them to Jake's cabin personally. The ride up the mountain was tense. Michael Henderson was a silver-haired man in his 60s who spoke about the resort project as if it was already a done deal. Patricia Vance was younger, sharp-eyed, and clearly focused on the bottom line. This Mitchell character is holding up a $100 million development over what amounts to 40 acres of wilderness, Patricia said as they drove through the mountain curves. There has to be a way to convince him to be reasonable. What exactly constitutes reasonable? Sarah asked. Taking our offer and moving somewhere else, Michael replied bluntly. We're prepared to pay significantly above market value for his property. And if he doesn't want to sell at any price? Michael and Patricia exchanged glances. There are other ways to acquire property for developments that serve the public interest, Patricia said carefully. Sarah realized they were talking about using legal pressure to force Jake to sell. The idea made her stomach turn, but she didn't say anything. When they arrived at the cabin, Jake was waiting outside with two other people Sarah didn't recognize. As the Henderson Group entourage got out of their rental cars, she could see the contrast between the two groups. Jake and his companions were dressed casually in jeans and hiking boots. The Chicago executives looked out of place in their expensive suits and polished shoes. Mr. Mitchell, Michael Henderson said, extending his hand. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. I'm Michael Henderson, and this is Patricia Vance, our development director. Jake shook their hands politely, but didn't smile. I'd like you to meet Dr. Elena Rodriguez from the Colorado Wildlife Conservation Society, and Tom Blackhorse, who represents the Regional Native American Tribal Council. Sarah was surprised by the presence of these additional people. Jake had clearly prepared for this meeting more strategically than she had expected. I thought this was going to be a private discussion, Patricia said, looking annoyed. Mr. Henderson, Ms. Vance, Dr. Rodriguez said before Jake could respond. Any development of this scale in this location would have significant impacts on wildlife migration patterns and water resources that extend far beyond Mr. Mitchell's property. The Conservation Society has legitimate interests in these discussions. Tom Blackhorse nodded agreement. This mountain area contains sites that are sacred to our people. We have treaty rights that may be affected by large-scale development here. Michael Henderson's jaw tightened. We're prepared to follow all environmental regulations and consult with appropriate tribal authorities as required by law. Regulations are minimum standards, Dr. Rodriguez replied. They don't address the cumulative environmental impact of a development this large in such a fragile ecosystem. Sarah found herself caught between the two groups, realizing that the situation was more complicated than she had understood. Jake had allies and legal resources that could create significant obstacles for the project. Perhaps we should take a look at the specific area where the resort would be built, Patricia suggested, clearly wanting to move the conversation away from environmental and cultural concerns. Jake led the group along the same trail he had walked with Sarah 2 weeks earlier. When they reached the overlook, he gestured toward the meadow and forest below. This is where your main building would go, he said. Those pine trees are over 200 years old. The meadow is a crucial feeding ground for elk and deer. The stream running through it provides water for wildlife throughout this entire region. Michael Henderson studied the view with obvious appreciation. It's a beautiful location, which is exactly why our guests will pay premium prices to stay here. Mr. Mitchell, we're offering you 3 times the assessed value of your property. You could buy land anywhere in Colorado with that money. I don't want land anywhere in Colorado, Jake replied. I want this land, which has been in my family for 4 generations. But surely you can see the economic benefits this resort would bring to the entire region, Patricia argued. Jobs for local people, tax revenue for the county, increased tourism dollars for surrounding businesses. Tom Blackhorse spoke up. Our communities have seen these promises before. The jobs are usually temporary construction work or low-wage service positions. The profits go to investors in Chicago or New York. Meanwhile, we lose access to traditional hunting and gathering areas that our people have used for centuries. Dr. Rodriguez added, the environmental costs are permanent, but the economic benefits are temporary. When the novelty wears off or economic conditions change, the resort owners can walk away. The destroyed ecosystem can't be restored. Sarah watched the exchange with growing unease. The Henderson Group representatives seemed unprepared for this level of organized opposition. Their confidence was clearly shaken by the presence of Dr. Rodriguez and Tom Blackhorse. Mr. Mitchell, Michael said, taking a different approach. I understand your attachment to this place. But you have to be realistic about the future. Development is coming to this area whether you participate or not. Wouldn't you rather work with us to ensure it's done responsibly? What exactly does done responsibly mean to you? Jake asked. Green building techniques, minimal environmental impact, respect for the natural beauty of the area, Patricia said. A 200-room resort with golf courses and ski runs has minimal environmental impact. Dr. Rodriguez challenged. Compared to some alternatives, yes, Patricia replied defensively. Sarah realized this was her moment to speak up. Jake had asked her to really listen to both sides, and she had been mostly quiet during the discussion. What if there were a different approach, she said. Something smaller in scale that could provide economic benefits without destroying the ecosystem? Both sides looked at her with surprise. Richard shot her a warning look, clearly unhappy that she was departing from her role as the Henderson Group's advocate. What are you thinking? Jake asked. Sarah took a deep breath. Ecotourism. A small number of luxury eco-cabins designed to blend into the landscape. Hiking and wildlife viewing instead of golf and skiing. Sustainable tourism that preserves the environment while bringing visitors and revenue to the area. Michael Henderson frowned. Ms. Martinez, that's not the project we hired your firm to design. I know, but it might be a better fit for this location. The Henderson Group doesn't invest in small-scale ecotourism projects, Patricia said firmly. We develop major destination resorts. Then, maybe this isn't the right location for your company, Jake said quietly. The meeting deteriorated quickly after that. The Henderson executives became increasingly frustrated with Jake's refusal to consider their offer, while Dr. Rodriguez and Tom Blackhorse raised additional legal and environmental concerns that could delay or prevent the project entirely. As the group walked back to the cabin, Richard pulled Sarah aside. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he whispered angrily. "Your job is to support our client, not suggest alternative projects they're not interested in." "I was trying to find a compromise solution that might work for everyone," Sarah replied. "The Henderson Group doesn't want a compromise. They want this resort built as designed, and they're paying us very well to make that happen." Back at the cabin, Michael Henderson made one final attempt to persuade Jake. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm going to be direct with you. This resort project has the support of the State Tourism Board and several county commissioners. If you continue to obstruct development, we have legal options that could force the sale of your property through eminent domain proceedings." Jake's expression hardened. "Are you threatening me, Mr. Henderson? I'm informing you of the realities of the situation. Large-scale economic development projects sometimes require property acquisition for the public good." Tom Blackhorse stepped forward. "Mr. Henderson, any eminent domain proceedings would face immediate legal challenges from the tribal council. We have treaty rights that supersede local development interests." Dr. Rodriguez added, "The Conservation Society would also file suit to protect the wildlife habitat. This area is home to several endangered species." Sarah could see that the Henderson Group was facing more opposition than they had expected. Michael and Patricia had clearly come to the meeting expecting to pressure a single landowner into selling. They weren't prepared to deal with organized environmental and cultural opposition. The meeting ended with no resolution. Jake maintained his refusal to sell, while the Henderson Group made it clear they intended to pursue the project with or without his cooperation. As the executives got into their rental cars for the drive back to Denver, Patricia pulled Sarah aside. "Ms. Martinez, I hope you understand that your performance today was disappointing. We expected your firm to help us solve problems, not create new ones." "I was trying to explore options that might work for everyone involved," Sarah said. "We're not paying for options. We're paying for results. I suggest you remember which side you're working for." The drive back to Denver was silent and tense. Richard was furious with Sarah for undermining the client relationship, while the Henderson executives discussed their legal strategies for forcing Jake to sell his property. That evening, Sarah sat in her apartment feeling more conflicted than ever. The meeting had made it clear that the Henderson Group was willing to use legal pressure to acquire Jake's land regardless of his wishes. She had gotten involved in the project thinking it was a business negotiation between willing parties, but it was turning into something more like a hostile takeover. Her phone rang around 9 o'clock. It was Jake. "Sarah, thank you for speaking up today about alternative approaches. I know it wasn't easy with your boss and clients there. I'm not sure it did any good. They're pretty committed to their original plan. Maybe, but it showed me that you're thinking about more than just your own career interests." Sarah felt a warmth at his words that surprised her. "Jake, I need to warn you about something. They're talking about using eminent domain to force you to sell. I figured as much. That's why I had Dr. Rodriguez, and the following Monday morning brought devastating news." Richard called Sarah into his office with a grim expression and legal documents spread across his desk. The Henderson Group filed eminent domain proceedings against Jake Mitchell's property on Friday afternoon, he announced. "They're claiming the resort development serves the public interest by creating jobs and increasing tourism revenue." Sarah felt sick. They're really going through with this? "They're serious about this project, Sarah. More serious than I think you realized." Richard studied her face carefully. "The question is, are you serious about your career here?" "What do you mean?" "Michael Henderson called me this weekend. He's concerned about your commitment to the project after your performance at Saturday's meeting. He specifically asked if we have other architects who could take over the account." The threat was crystal clear. Sarah's entire future at the firm hung in the balance. "Richard, I've put months of work into this project. The designs are exactly what they asked for. The designs are excellent. It's your attitude they're questioning. They need to know that our firm is 100% committed to making this resort happen." Sarah's mind raced. Losing the Henderson account would effectively end her career at Pinnacle Architecture. Richard would never forgive her for costing the firm such a lucrative client, and word would spread throughout the industry that she was difficult to work with. "What do they want me to do?" "They want you to testify at the eminent domain hearing in support of the project. As the architect, Your professional opinion about the public benefits of the resort would carry significant weight with the judge. When is the hearing? Next Friday. Jake Mitchell's lawyers are fighting the proceedings, but the Henderson Group's legal team thinks they have a strong case. Sarah spent the week in turmoil. She threw herself into preparing for the hearing, researching the legal precedents for eminent domain in tourism development cases. The more she learned, the more she realized that the Henderson Group probably would win. Courts generally sided with development projects that promised significant economic benefits, especially in rural areas with limited job opportunities. But she also couldn't stop thinking about Jake and what this meant for him. Losing his family's land through forced sale would be devastating, especially after the way his marriage had ended and he had built a new life on the mountain. On Wednesday evening, Sarah surprised herself by driving back up to Jake's cabin. She told herself she needed to see how he was handling the legal situation, but she knew there were deeper reasons for the trip. Jake was splitting firewood behind the cabin when she arrived. He looked up with surprise as she got out of her car. "Sarah, I didn't expect to see you here. I wanted to talk to you about the eminent domain proceedings." Jake set down his axe and wiped sweat from his forehead. "Come inside. I'll make some coffee." The cabin felt familiar and welcoming, just as it had during the snowstorm 3 weeks earlier. But the atmosphere between them was more tense now, weighted down by the legal battle and their conflicted loyalties. "How are you holding up?" Sarah asked as they sat at the kitchen table. "My lawyers think we have a good chance of stopping this, at least temporarily. The environmental and tribal rights issues could delay things for months or years. But that means years of legal battles and uncertainty for you." "True. But some things are worth fighting for." Jake studied her face. "What about you? How are you handling being caught in the middle of this?" Sarah had been dreading this conversation, but she knew Jake deserved honesty. "They want me to testify at the hearing in support of the resort project." Jake's expression didn't change, but she could see the disappointment in his eyes. "And will you?" "I don't know. My career depends on this project succeeding. If I don't support the Henderson Group, I'll lose my job and probably never work as an architect again." "So you're going to testify that taking my family's land serves the public interest?" The way he said it made Sarah feel ashamed. "Jake, I don't have a choice. You don't understand what it's like to work in a competitive field where one wrong move can end everything you've worked for. I understand more than you think. I made compromises in my marriage, in my previous career, always telling myself I didn't have a choice. But there's always a choice, Sarah. Sometimes it's just between easy choices and right choices. That's easy for you to say. You inherited your land, and you work as a freelance consultant. You have the luxury of making principled decisions because you're not dependent on corporate politics for your livelihood." Jake was quiet for a long moment. "You're right about some of that. I am fortunate to have this land and the freedom it gives me. But I wasn't always in this position." "What do you mean?" "Before my divorce, I worked for a large environmental consulting firm in Denver. I was on track to become a partner, making excellent money, respected in my field. Then, I was assigned to a project that involved covering up environmental damage caused by a mining company, the firm's biggest client." Sarah could see where this was going. "What did you do?" "I documented the evidence and presented it to my supervisors, expecting them to force the mining company to clean up the contamination. Instead, they buried my report and transferred me to another project." "So you left the firm?" "Not right away. I told myself I could do more good from inside the system, that I could gradually change things if I was patient. But the compromises kept getting bigger. Eventually, I was asked to sign off on an environmental impact study that I knew contained false information. And then? Then, I had to choose between my career and my integrity. I chose integrity, resigned from the firm, and reported the false information to state environmental agencies." Jake's voice was quiet but firm. "My marriage didn't survive the stress and financial uncertainty that followed. My ex-wife said I was selfish for throwing away our secure future over principles." Sarah felt a chill of recognition. What happened to the mining company? They were forced to pay for the environmental cleanup, which cost them millions. The consulting firm lost the account and fired several people, including my former supervisor. "Do you regret it?" "The divorce, yes. Losing my marriage was devastating. But reporting the false information? Never. Some things are more important than career advancement or financial security. They sat in silence for several minutes, both lost in thought. Sarah realized that Jake had faced the same kind of choice she was facing now, and he had chosen differently than she was planning to choose. Sarah, Jake said finally, I want to show you something. He led her to a small study off the main room, where the walls were covered with family photographs and documents. Jake pointed to a faded photograph of a young man in work clothes standing next to a mining cart. That's my great-grandfather, Thomas Mitchell. He came to Colorado in 1922 to work in the silver mines. The pay was terrible, the conditions were dangerous, and the mine owners treated the workers like they were disposable. Jake pointed to another photograph showing a group of men holding protest signs. In 1924, Thomas joined a miners' strike demanding better safety conditions and fair wages. The mine owners brought in armed guards to break up the strike. Several miners were killed, including Thomas's best friend. What did he do? He could have given up and gone back to work under the same terrible conditions. His wife was pregnant, and they desperately needed the income. But, instead, he used the small inheritance from his father's farm to buy this land and start a new life. Jake showed her more photographs documenting his family's history on the mountain. His grandfather had built the first cabin during the Great Depression. His father had expanded the property and worked as a forest ranger. Each generation had faced challenges and opportunities to sell or develop the land for short-term profit, but each had chosen to preserve it instead. This land represents 4 generations of people who believe that some things are more valuable than money, Jake said. I can't be the one who breaks that tradition, no matter what it costs me. Sarah understood now why Jake was fighting so hard. This wasn't just about environmental protection or opposition to development. It was about honoring the sacrifices and values of his family. But understanding Jake's position didn't make her own choice any easier. The hearing was in 2 days, and she still didn't know what she was going to do. Jake, what if there was another way? She asked. What if I could convince the Henderson Group to consider a different location or a smaller project? Sarah, you've already tried that. They're not interested in alternatives. They want this specific location for this specific project, and they're willing to use legal force to get it. But what if I refuse to testify in support of the eminent domain proceedings? What if I testified about alternative approaches instead? Jake looked at her seriously. That would probably end your career at your current firm. Are you prepared for that? Sarah's heart pounded as she considered the implications. Losing this job would mean starting over, probably taking a significant step backward in her career. But continuing to support a project she no longer believed in felt like betraying everything she had originally wanted to accomplish as an architect. I don't know, she admitted. I've worked so hard to get where I am. The idea of throwing it all away is terrifying. You wouldn't be throwing it away. You'd be redirecting it towards something more meaningful. How can you be sure? What if I can't find another job? What if no one will hire an architect who turned against her own client? Jake moved closer to her. Sarah, what if you started your own firm? What if you specialized in exactly the kind of sustainable, environmentally responsible projects you really care about? With what money? Starting an architecture firm takes significant capital, and I need to build a client base from scratch. What if you had a partner? Someone who could provide both financial backing and connections in the environmental consulting world. Sarah looked at him with surprise. Are you offering to go into business with me? I'm offering to help you find a way to use your talents for something better than helping corporations steamroll communities and ecosystems. The idea was tempting, but also terrifying. Going into business with Jake would mean making both a professional and personal commitment that would change everything about her life. Jake, there's something else we need to talk about. What happened between us that weekend? The kiss, Jake said quietly. Yes, we can't pretend it didn't happen, but we also can't let personal feelings cloud our judgment about business decisions. Jake stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. What if it's not about letting personal feelings cloud business judgment? What if it's about recognizing that some decisions are about more than just business? What do you mean? I mean that life is about more than career success or financial security. It's about finding work that matters, places you love, and people who make you want to be better than you are. Sarah felt her heart racing as Jake reached out and gently touched her face. Sarah, I've been thinking about you every day since you left here 3 weeks ago. Not just about the business situation, but about you. About how much I enjoyed talking with you. How right it felt having you here. Jake, this is complicated. We barely know each other, and we're in the middle of a legal battle that could affect both our futures. You're right, it is complicated. But sometimes the most important decisions in life are complicated. Before Sarah could respond, Jake kissed her again. This time, she didn't pull away. The kiss was deeper and more passionate than their first one, filled with 3 weeks of suppressed longing and uncertainty. When they finally broke apart, Sarah felt breathless and overwhelmed. I don't know what to do, she whispered. About the hearing or about us? Both. Jake held her close, and she could feel the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Sarah, I can't make these decisions for you, but I can tell you that whatever you decide about the hearing, it won't change how I feel about you. How do you feel about me? I think I'm falling in love with you, Jake said quietly. I know it's crazy given the circumstances, but there it is. Sarah's breath caught. She had been trying so hard to keep their relationship professional, but she couldn't deny her own feelings anymore. I think I'm falling in love with you too. And you're right, it is crazy. They spent that evening talking about their hopes and fears for the future. Jake shared more details about his vision for sustainable development projects that could bring economic benefits without environmental destruction. Sarah talked about her dream of starting her own firm focused on green architecture and community-centered design. What if we could create something together? Jake asked. A business that combines your architectural expertise with my environmental consulting background. It's a beautiful idea, but it would take years to build up enough clients to make a living. I have some money saved from selling my Denver house and my consulting work. Enough to get us started if we're careful. Sarah was tempted, but the practical challenges seemed overwhelming. Jake, even if we could make the business work, what about us personally? Starting a romantic relationship and a business partnership at the same time seems like a recipe for disaster. Maybe, or maybe we're exactly what each other needs. The next morning, Sarah drove back to Denver with her mind more conflicted than ever. She had less than 24 hours to decide what to say at the eminent domain hearing. That afternoon, she called Dr. Elena Rodriguez at the Colorado Wildlife Conservation Society. Dr. Rodriguez, this is Sarah Martinez. We met at Jake Mitchell's cabin last Saturday. Of course, Sarah. What can I do for you? I wanted to ask about the environmental impact of the Henderson Group's resort project. As an architect, I'm trying to understand the full scope of what this development would mean for the ecosystem. Dr. Rodriguez spent an hour explaining the complex web of environmental relationships that would be affected by the resort. The more Sarah learned, the more she realized that the project would cause irreversible damage to an ecosystem that had taken centuries to develop. Sarah, Dr. Rodriguez said finally, may I ask why you're calling? I thought you were working for the developers. I am, but I'm having second thoughts about the project. I'm supposed to testify tomorrow in support of the eminent domain proceedings, but I'm not sure I can do it in good conscience. What would happen if you testified against the project instead? I'd probably lose my job and damage my reputation in the industry. That's a high price to pay for doing what you believe is right. Yes, it is. But Jake Mitchell pointed out that some things are more important than career advancement. Jake's a good man. He's put himself at significant financial and legal risk to protect something he believes in. That evening, Sarah made her decision. She called Richard and told him she needed to withdraw from testifying at the hearing. Sarah, what the hell are you talking about? The Henderson Group is counting on your testimony. Richard, I can't in good conscience testify in support of taking someone's property for a project that will cause significant environmental damage. Environmental damage? Sarah, you're an architect, not an environmental scientist. Your job is to design buildings, not make policy decisions about land use. My job is to use my professional expertise responsibly. I can't testify that this project serves the public interest when I don't believe that's true. Richard's voice turned cold. Sarah, if you don't testify tomorrow, you're fired. And I'll make sure everyone in this industry knows that you can't be trusted to support your own clients. Sarah took a deep breath. I understand. I'll clean out my office on Monday. The eminent domain hearing was held in the Jefferson County Courthouse on Friday morning. Sarah arrived early and sat in the back of the courtroom, watching as the various parties assembled. The Henderson Group's legal team occupied one side of the room, confident and well-prepared. Jake sat with his lawyers on the other side, along with Dr. Rodriguez, Tom Blackhorse, and several other supporters. When the judge asked for testimony in support of the eminent domain petition, the Henderson Group's lawyers called several witnesses. A county commissioner testified about the economic benefits of the resort. A tourism expert discussed the project's potential to bring visitors and revenue to the region. A traffic consultant explained how the resort would improve local road infrastructure. Then, the judge asked, "Does the petitioner have any additional witnesses?" Michael Henderson's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, we were planning to call Sarah Martinez, the project architect, but she has informed us that she will not be available to testify." "I see. Do you have any other witnesses?" "No, Your Honor. We believe our case is strong based on the testimony already presented." When it came time for Jake's legal team to present their defense, they called Dr. Rodriguez to testify about the environmental impact of the project. Tom Blackhorse explained the cultural and historical significance of the area to Native American communities. Jake testified about his family's connection to the land and his refusal to sell at any price. Then, Jake's lawyer said something that surprised everyone in the courtroom. "Your Honor, we'd like to call one additional witness. Sarah Martinez." Sarah felt her heart pound as she walked to the witness stand. She had not expected to testify at all, but Jake's lawyer had apparently subpoenaed her as a defense witness. "Ms. Martinez," the lawyer began, "you were the architect hired to design the proposed resort. Is that correct?" "Yes. And you've had the opportunity to study the site extensively and understand the full scope of the proposed development?" "Yes. In your professional opinion, is this the only location where the Henderson Group could build a resort of this type?" Sarah took a deep breath. "No. There are other locations in Colorado that would be suitable for a luxury resort without requiring the use of eminent domain or causing significant environmental damage." The Henderson Group's lawyer immediately objected, but the judge allowed the testimony to continue. "Ms. Martinez, are you aware of alternative development approaches that could bring economic benefits to this region without requiring Mr. Mitchell's property?" "Yes. Ecotourism projects, sustainable cabin developments, and outdoor recreation facilities could provide jobs and tourism revenue while preserving the environmental and cultural values of the area." "Thank you, Ms. Martinez." The Henderson Group's lawyer cross-examined Sarah aggressively, trying to discredit her testimony by pointing out that she had been fired from her firm for refusing to support the project. But Sarah stood her ground, calmly explaining her professional assessment of the situation. After hearing all the testimony, the judge took a recess to consider the case. Sarah found Jake in the courthouse hallway. "Thank you," he said simply. "I hope it makes a difference." "It already has. You chose to do what you thought was right, even though it cost you your job." When the court reconvened, the judge delivered his decision. While this court recognizes the potential economic benefits of the proposed resort development, I find that the petitioner has not demonstrated that taking Mr. Mitchell's property through eminent domain is necessary for the public good. There are alternative locations for such a development that would not require the forced sale of private property with significant environmental and cultural value. Furthermore, the testimony has raised serious questions about the environmental impact of this project that should be addressed through the normal permitting and environmental review process before any land acquisition is considered. The petition for eminent domain is denied. The courtroom erupted in cheers from Jake's supporters. The Henderson Group's executives looked stunned and angry. Sarah felt a mixture of relief and anxiety about what she had just done. Outside the courthouse, Jake pulled her aside. "Sarah, I know you just gave up everything for this. I want you to know how much that means to me." "I didn't do it just for you," Sarah said. "I did it because it was the right thing to do." "What will you do now?" Sarah smiled, feeling more free than she had in years. "I think it's time to start that sustainable architecture firm we talked about. Are you still interested in being my partner?" Jake's face broke into a broad grin. "I can't think of anything I'd rather do. Business partner or personal partner?" Sarah asked. "Both, if you'll have me." Sarah stood on her toes and kissed him, right there on the courthouse steps in front of everyone. I thought you'd never ask. 6 months later, Sarah and Jake's firm, Mitchell Martinez Environmental Design, had signed their first 3 clients: a sustainable retreat center, an eco-friendly housing development, and a solar-powered community center. Their business was small but growing, focused on projects that enhanced communities while protecting the environment. Sarah had never been happier in her work. Every project felt meaningful, every client shared her values, and every day brought new challenges that excited rather than stressed her. More importantly, her relationship with Jake had grown deeper and stronger. They had taken their time getting to know each other outside the crisis that had brought them together, and they had found that their partnership worked as well in daily life as it had in that moment of conflict. On a warm Saturday evening in early summer, they sat on the deck of Jake's cabin watching the sunset paint the mountains in brilliant shades of orange and pink. The meadow below was green and peaceful, filled with wildflowers and the sounds of birds and insects. "Any regrets?" Jake asked, taking Sarah's hand. "About leaving Pinnacle Architecture?" "Not for a moment." Sarah squeezed his hand. "What about you? Any regrets about turning down millions of dollars for this land?" "Never. Some things are more valuable than money." "Like what?" Jake smiled and pulled her close. "Like finding work that matters, places you love, and people who make you want to be better than you are." Sarah rested her head on his shoulder, content and grateful for the unexpected path that had led her here. Sometimes the most important decisions in life were indeed the complicated ones, but they were also the ones that led to the most rewarding destinations. As the stars came out over the mountain, Sarah realized that the weekend that had trapped them together had actually set them both free to become the people they were meant to be. Tom there today? They wanted to see what kind of opposition they'd face. Is there really a legal basis for stopping the project? Possibly. The environmental and tribal rights issues could tie things up in court for years. But that kind of fight would be expensive and stressful for everyone involved. Sarah realized she was in an impossible position. Her career depended on the success of the Henderson project, but she was increasingly uncomfortable with the tactics they were willing to use. "Jake, what if I could convince them to consider a smaller, more sustainable project? Would you be open to that kind of development?" "Depending on the details, maybe. But, Sarah, you need to decide what's really important to you. Are you going to keep working for people who are willing to destroy something beautiful for profit, or are you going to find a way to use your talents for something better?" The question haunted Sarah long after they hung up. She had worked so hard to get to this point in her career, but the path forward suddenly seemed much less clear than it had just a few weeks ago. Everything had changed since that unexpected weekend at Jake's cabin, and especially since that kiss that had sparked something she was still trying to understand. Important things than career success. They walked back to the cabin in silence, the easy companionship of the morning replaced by tension and uncertainty. Sarah packed her bags quickly, eager to get back to familiar ground where she could think clearly about what had happened. Jake helped her load her car and scraped the snow off her windshield. "Drive safely," he said. "And Sarah? Whatever happens with this resort project, I'm glad we met." "Me too," Sarah replied, though she wasn't sure if that was entirely true. As she drove down the mountain road, Sarah's mind raced with conflicting thoughts and emotions. The kiss had been incredible, more passionate than anything she had felt in years. But Jake represented everything that stood in the way of her career goals. She couldn't afford to let personal feelings interfere with the Henderson project. Too much was at stake. But as she glanced in her rearview mirror and saw the mountains disappearing behind her, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was leaving something important behind.